When done right, bylaws don't just guide your governance, they protect your mission, reassure your funders, and keep your board aligned. How to write bylaws for a nonprofit in 2025 with an AI clause. Let me ask you something. What if your next major funder asks, show me your governance documents and how you use AI responsibly? In 2025 and beyond, that's not just hypothetical, it's real. The grant landscape is shifting fast. Donors want transparency, tech-savvy operations, and accountability baked into your DNA of your nonprofit. You could be locked out before your grant proposal is even read. So we're really talking about bylaws and why they're important to your grant writing, as well as understanding what 2025 is with AI for your bylaws as well. Today, I also have a template for you, and I'm going to walk you through how to write bylaws that serve as your nonprofit's backbone in this era. And yes, we'll include a modern AI clause. So let's dive in. And I'm Holly Rustick. I am the founder of the Freelance Grant Writer Academy and the Grant Professional Mentorship. We help you replace full-time revenue on part-time hours writing grants from home. Okay, why do bylaws even matter, right? Why do they matter? Your bylaws aren't a dusty relic you file away, okay? They are your playbook, like literally the blueprint for how your organization behaves, especially when things get messy, and messy they do get. When your funding sources shift priority, a board member resigns midterm, or you're integrating new tech like AI, you need clarity. And they are the driving force of that clarity for your nonprofit, for your organization. Bylaws that don't define structure, expectations, and guardrails become a liability, not an asset. When I say they should say everything, that's not an exaggeration. A well-crafted set of bylaws allows a newcomer to pick them up and know exactly how your board operates, what's expected, and how decisions are made. You should be able to hand your bylaws to a new board member and they will know their role immediately. So let's go ahead and walk through the sections that you must include in your bylaws. And I'm going to call out the ones that often get underaddressed but will be mission critical moving forward. First off, your name, your purpose, and your mission alignment. Start with your full legal name and then state your nonprofit's purpose. This purpose needs you to mirror your articles of incorporation, which is another document. We have other videos on that. And they also give you flexibility to evolve. Don't box yourself into overly narrow language. Future funders or programs should still feel within scope. The next section, board of directors, structure, and expectations. And once again, for a template, for a free downloadable, see the link below. This is non-negotiable. You want your board size to be both manageable and protective of decision-making. Often odd number, 3 to 15, is common to avoid tied votes. And in many states, you have to have at least 3 people on your board to actually have a board of directors. So you do need to check with your state as well. If you have too many, then you have a hard time making actually quorum, so you can't make any decisions. You don't need 15 board members if you have a very small nonprofit either. But you also want to make sure that you have a good matrix of board members, such as people that have networks in the community for fundraising, lawyers, CPAs, those types of things as well. People that understand business, so business people on your board of directors as well. That can really help set up your board for sustainability and to drive forward the nonprofit. I've served on boards where we have smaller boards, like 5 people on a board, all the way up to 13 people on a board. And it really depends on what you're doing for your mission of your nonprofit as well. So you also need term lengths, right? You have to have term lengths. So how long, if somebody becomes a board member, will they be a board member for? And we like to say a staggered 2 or 3 year term is nice, because if you have like 2-year terms and everyone comes on at the same time, and then they all come off at the same time and a new board comes on, then you don't have any institutional knowledge pass on as well. So it is nice to have, like, say if you have a 7-member board and you have 3 members that'll come on and then 3 members that'll go out, but you still have 4 people that have been on the board, right? Those are kind of like your staggered terms. So anywhere from 2 years to 3 years is pretty good. Sometimes 3 years does scare people. That's a long-term commitment. I'm even on a board of 5 years, so that's a huge commitment. Okay, so let's talk about the election process of your board. How new directors come on, how vacancies are filled, right? You definitely need to be talking about that. How is the election actually run? And we also need to bring up resignation and removal. What happens if somebody somebody underperforms and they don't hold to their responsibilities and duties, what happens to them? How can they be removed? What if they also resign, right? And I've seen that happen on many boards, and I'm in both of those scenarios. And it's sticky, especially if you need to remove them if you don't have that process in your bylaws. So oftentimes it's like they have to come at least to 75% of the meetings and be involved. So there's measurements that are very easy to measure and they're very neutral to measure. So you can clearly say, I mean, even if it's a friend and you got to remove them from your bylaw or from your board, it can be weird and sticky. But if you have these inside your bylaws, then you're just leaning, well, this is what you agreed to and you're not holding up to it. So we do have to remove you. Also, you need to have board powers and duties. So the board hires the leaderships, they set the policy, they oversee the finances. Those are the things that you really need to understand. What is this board doing? What are the main responsibilities? So you have your officers on the board. You usually have a president or board chair, a vice chair, a secretary, a treasurer, and then you have other board members. So you do want to understand what each role is responsible to do. Don't just have the titles and stop there. Define exactly what each one is responsible for, i.e. taking the minutes, financial reporting, compliance duties, etc. Because many boards stumble when they don't have this because their roles overlap or they're too ambiguous. And then even if I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going to join a board, but you don't tell me what I need to do or what my duties are, I'm not going to do anything because I don't know, right? And I don't want to overstep anywhere, even if I'm an experienced board member. So having this listed out is very important. All right, let's talk about meetings now, right? You need to have regular, annual, or special meetings and about quorum. So you do need to state how many meetings per year. Are you going to do it monthly, quarterly, bi-monthly, etc.? Not just whenever needed. Also, you have to have how you're going to provide the notice of meetings, how far in advance, who's going to alert it. It's usually the secretary needs to send out a notice of meetings at least 2 weeks beforehand to remind people, that sort of thing. And if you want to call a special meeting, who can call them, etc. We also want to know what constitutes a quorum. So the minimum number of decision makers in the room. Also, can they show up electronically, that sort of thing, like on Zoom, all of the things, or like on WhatsApp, on audio. So having those things noted inside your bylaws is really important. And you usually also have an annual meeting. And this is when the board elections happens, any main reports, any strategy reviews, etc. You already want to define when that is. And you don't have to have like a specific date, like December 2nd. But I would say more of like the first Monday of every December, right? Because that date is going to change, but that day won't in that way. And as far as meetings, what do I recommend? I love a monthly meeting for a board. I feel like there's a lot to catch up on, but I also know board members can be busy. I don't really like quarterly meetings because if you miss one meeting, you miss 6 months of the year. And that's a huge thing. So I do prefer monthly meetings or at least every other month. Let's talk about something a little juicy. Compensation or non-compensation policies. Many people forget this, and your bylaw should clearly state whether board members are compensated or not. For most nonprofits, they are not compensated, but declaring non-compensation up front avoids conflict and surprises. And sometimes you can have a reimbursable policy too, like for gas or that sort of thing. And I'm not saying not to compensate your board members. Many people also have like, we'll compensate them $50 a meeting to come, right? And that sort of incentive. You just have to have that clearly stated of what your decision is. All right, let's talk about conflict of interest and recusal policy. You need to have this. You need to have a conflict of interest policy. This is essential in 2025 more than ever. Every board member should commit to recusing themselves from votes when they have a conflict. Spell out how conflicts are declared, handled, and documented. Funders often ask to see this specifically, this clause as well. Fiscal year, accounting, and audit requirements. Make sure you set your fiscal year, whether that's January to December as a calendar year, July to June, etc. Then define your accounting practices, who approves audits, who has oversight. When funders look at your financials, they want to see that your fiscal policies are built into your governance. All right, let's talk about indemnification and liability protection. You do need language protecting board members from personal legal exposure when acting in good faith on behalf of the nonprofit. If you don't include indemnification, potential board members might shy away from serving, especially in volatile times. All right, and amendments. Your bylaws should include how they can be changed, right? It's not just setting set in stone, but it kind of is. You need an opportunity to change them because they shouldn't just be dusty, remember? Typically, a majority or 2/3 vote on your board to make amendments. Make it clear so nobody later claims we never agreed when changes are proposed. All right, now let's talk about modern forward-looking clauses, AI tech data protection. This is one of the places your bylaws can signal that your nonprofit is future ready. Here's a sample responsible AI clause you could adapt. The board shall oversee and approve any use of artificial intelligence tools and programs, fundraising, administration, or other operations of the nonprofit. AI systems should only be used in alignment with mission, with appropriate human oversight, transparency, and protection of privacy and data security. Any decision materially affecting clients or beneficiaries that is assisted by AI must be reviewed and ratified by human decision makers, quote unquote. You can tailor that lighter or stronger depending on your risk tolerance and your tech maturity. But including something now sends a signal to funders and stakeholders you're not scrambling later. So there you have it, your essential roadmap for writing bylaws built for the shifting funding environment in 2025. When done right, bylaws don't just guide your governance, they protect your mission, reassure your funders, and keep your board aligned. If you would like the template, make sure you click below. Here's to growing funding and advancing impact.